Chapter 11 Heat. Mr. Lima from the Bronx Borough's president's office, the man from the park, in the white shirt and tie, was in front of 825 Gerard when Mr. Minyard dropped Michael off after the Westchester South game. Mrs. C was with him. She was sitting in the lawn chair. She was set up on the sidewalk sometimes on the warm summer nights like this. Sometimes some of the older people in the building would be there with her, with chairs of their own, just sitting on the front steps, listening to the music on a battery-powered radio one of them would bring with them. Or somebody would open up the front windows in one of the front floor apartments facing the street, as they would listen to one of the Spanish music stations. Unless the men would win out, and there would be a Yankee game on. Sometimes, if the game was on, Michael would come down and sit with them, imagining that the residents of 825 Duran were one big family, with Mrs. Cora, the grandma of them all. Mostly the old people would just talk, in English and Spanish, like they were making two languages into one, and watch the world go by. Michael wanted it to go by 825 Gerard right now. He felt his heart racing inside him, as if he'd just gone from first to third on a single, or as if he'd run all the way here from New Rochelle. Maybe getting hit in the head wasn't going to be the worst thing that happened to him tonight. Mrs. C. Usually Mrs. C didn't get out of her lawn chair until she was ready to go to bed. She would joke that picking herself up was even harder at the end of the day than walking up the hill from River Avenue. But she got right up out of her chair now, no problem. Popped up like one of those little pop-up messages he'd see at Manny's when Manny would make him watch a music video on MTV. Greeted Michael like he really was her grandson, her long-lost grandson. Mrs. C hugged him to her so fiercely, Michael had trouble breathing for a second, kissed the side of his head and whispered, "Say as little as possible, little one." Then she pulled back and plopped down on her chair as Mr. Lima came over and put out his hand. "Fred Lima, son," he said, "press secretary to Mrs. Amorosa, the borough president for these parts," making the Bronx sound a little bit like the Old West or something. Michael shook the man's hand the way Poppy had taught him, firmly, looking him right in the eye. "Michael Arrow," he said. "Finally I get to meet the boy hero," Mr. Lima said. Manny always said that the only player on the team who never got nervous was Michael, except now. "I just got lucky is all," he said. He looked up Duran, where some kid was playing catch with a football, and imagined himself sprinting past them, away, the way he sprinted away from Mr. Lima the other night. "Now what I hear," Mr. Lima said, "I hear that the only 12-year-old who could have made that throw is the 12-year-old who did." Michael looked down at Mrs. C. She said, "Just thank you, little one." "Thank you," he said, looking down. Mrs. Lima said, "Mrs. Corey here tells me that she's sort of been looking out for you and your brother while your dad's out of town." Mrs. Corey jumped right in, not waiting for Michael to answer. "You should see the two of them eat my paellas," she said. She pointed at Michael. "But this one here," she said, "no matter how much he eats, he stays as skinny as the one of my sewing needles." Now no one said anything. From one of the high windows Michael could hear the voices of the Yankee announcers. Where were they tonight? Detroit, Chicago, to play the White Sox. Mr. Lima cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "I'm glad I finally tracked you down, Mr. Michael Arrow. The other day I would have needed one of those little motor scooters the police use to ride around the stadium to catch up with you." Michael said, "I was running after my girlfriend." "Girlfriend?" That came out way too easily. Mrs. Corey said, "My Michael has a new girlfriend?" "She's a girl, and a friend, Mrs. C. Somebody I met in the park." Then he yawned. It just came out of him, the way it did on the mound sometimes. Many thought it just showed how super relaxed he was, no matter how close the game. Michael knew better. The yawn meant he was feeling some nerves. He heard Tom Seaver on the Mets game one time say how he used to yawn in big spots and his teammates all thought he was crazy. It made him feel better, a little less crazy about his own yawning. He covered it now by saying to Mr. Lima, "I'm kind of tired, sir. We had a tough game tonight. and I was going to head upstairs to listen to the Yankees White Sox game until my brother comes home. Carlos, Mr. Lima said, going into his senior year at high school, right? Everybody knew everything all of a sudden. Almost everything. Right, Michael said. Well, Mr. Lima said, since I never want to keep a good Bronx boy from listening to his favorite team, let me tell you what I've been telling Mrs. Cora here. Since she turns out to be the one whose purse you rescued, we'd like to have you and her and your brother and your father, if he gets back in the next couple of days, come down and have your picture taken with Mr. Amorosa and Officer Crandall, of course. Michael said, "Oh, you don't have to go through all that trouble." "We want to, that's the thing," Mr. Lima said, "and it's no trouble, really. This is the kind of story, right from our neighborhood, that people need to know about. A boy from the neighborhood coming to the aid of a woman like Mrs. Cora, who turns out to be one of his best friends. In the process, the boy isn't just a friend to her, but to the police." Mrs. C started to say something, but Mr. Lima put up his hand, smiling. "Please, I promise this is the end of my speech," he said. "There's still too many people who only want to talk about crime in the Bronx, even though we're much safer now than we have ever been. We want to shine a spotlight on the Crime Stopper." He handed Michael his business card. "Tell your dad about it when you talk to him," he said. "Will he be calling you tonight?" "Probably not," Michael said, looking off. He looked at the card. There was a business number, a phone number, a cell phone number, a fax number, and an email address. "Or you can just have your dad call me directly," Mr. Lima said. "We'll set something up for next week, maybe." He leaned down, shook Mrs. Cora's hand, told her it was nice chatting with her, and not to get up. "Don't worry," she said, "I won't." Mr. Lima shook Michael's hand one more time, then said he was going to jump on the next train and head home. "Your father must be very proud of you," said Michael, and was gone. For now. "What are we going to do?" Michael said. "Eat," Mrs. Cora said, extending her hand in a way that meant Michael needed to help her up this time. "I made pot roast." "I meant," Michael said, folding up the lawn chair. "I know what you meant, little one," she said. And I said, "Let's go eat." Mrs. C thought food could cure about anything.